Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel for another interesting review and another export hell from Bavaria. This is from the Klosterbrauerei Baumburg, located in the town Altenmarkt an der Alt in Traunstein region in Chiemgau in Oberbayern. So it's the very southeast of Bavaria, close to Salzburg and the Austrian border. This is a quite old brewery, founded already 1621, and I'm not sure actually if it's a monastery brewery yet, or how I should explain it, if it's still a monastery brewery. But the name suggests that it's at least started as a monastery brewery, since it's the name of the brewery is Klosterbrauerei Baumburg. And it's their export, as I said, and export, they call it export hell, which is quite interesting because export is a beer style which often are a little bit stronger than normal helles, but this one is an export hell, so it's gonna be interesting to see if I can find out any difference between this one or a normal helles or a normal export. But I'm gonna go on about that on the tasting part. Over to some information about this brewery, which is interesting. I'm of course gonna link to the brewer's website in the description box below, where I found some information about it. One closer look of the label and the cap, which is giving a really nice impression of this bottle to me. As you can see, it's the thick bottle type, often used by smaller breweries in the area, as I mentioned, not the tall bottle type, but the thicker one. The Klosterbrauerei Baumburg GmbH and Company KG, or Klosterbrauerei Baumburg, or Baumburger for short, is a beer brewery in the Baumburg Abbey near Altenmarkt an der Alz. Around 5,000 hectoliters of beer are produced each year. The brewery was officially founded in 1612. In fact, beer was brewed much earlier at the Baumburg. Documents from the year 1435 already report brewing. During the secularization in Bavaria in 1803, the monastery was bought by Mr. von Röckel. 7 years later, however, he went into bankruptcy, so that the innkeeper from the Altenmarkt took over the brewery. After he died, it passed into the possession of Ludwig Nigel in 1858. Between 1913 and 1950, the brewery was passed on to the family. From 1950, Johann Dietl was the owner. The water for beer production comes from the Alz and the Traun. After it is removed, it's converted to table water with less than 6 mg of nitrate per liter. The barley is grown in the Baumburger fields near Altenmarkt. The hops comes from Hallertau. After the beer has been produced, it is stored for at least 8 to 12 weeks in a cellar at 1 or 2 degrees to mature. Since the Baumburg does not have its own bottling plant, the beer is bottled at the Schlossbrauerei Stein and the Weißbräu Schwendel. The electricity that is needed to produce the beer is produced in Alt's own hydropower plant. In 2008, a fish ladder was built there. Chemicals are not used to clean brewing systems. Instead, hot water over 100 degrees Celsius is used. The beer is only delivered directly within a radius of 25 kilometers. On other routes, the company's sales partners transport the bottles and barrels. The beer is sold in district of Altötting, in the district of Rosenheim, and in the district of Traunstein, also in the cities such as Munich and Pforzheim. The brewery is a member of Brauring, a corporation company of private breweries from Germany, Austria and Switzerland. And more information that I found on their website. The history of the monastery brewery. is a moving one. Clear more than 400 years of brewing history officially, or more than 600 years unofficially, because a little something has gone around since the years 1400. Officially, unofficially, illegally, legally, it's always the same. It is known that the Augustinian canons brewed from old age, because liquida non frangunt ienum, which is Latin for liquid does not break the fast. That is why beer was basically a staple in the monasteries, especially during Lent. Beer was considered liquid food for the monks who worked hard and were given little to eat. Up to 5 measurements were allowed daily. Of course, brewing was also carried out in Baumburg for personal use. The canons were not allowed to trade their beers, and the monastery had no brewing rights, which didn't really stop the monks from selling their brew. This proves the Baumburger Biersech of April 28, 1406. The canons were all actually not allowed to sell their beer, but they obviously wrote invoices. So with the Biersech, the monastery tavern host Kaspar Heitenhaler was charged Bier zu ein Pfund Pfennig. Klostertafern wird Bier. That was it with the fair use That was it with the fair of own use. At least after the Lent period, the remaining stocks seem to have brought up to profit, whereby personal needs should have been a house number, especially during Lent in Baumburg. Around 200 people were looked after in the monastery, home, school, the Altenmarkt, armory, and the nail-smithy. Then something came together. How to prot beer. From 1612, in the term of Probst Urban Stamler, who lived 1587 to 1622, the beer was then allowed to be sold. Time is considered the official year of founding for the brewery. However, the Probst, who was considered more of a wine drinker anyway, disagreed with the quality of the brew, but brother cellar master had ordered him instead of the sour Kremsländer brown beer for the meal, because the stress already hit the liver of the Probst. The lawsuits against Ladislaus Oswald, Count von Thüring and Zengling zum Stein and Pertenstein, who claimed rights within the monastery and at the Traun, the sloppy conditions with 2 women, one to Baumburg, the other to Gars, and the poor barley harvest, and as a result the bad malt and the inferior beer. Besides, the brewer didn't seem to have been an ornament of his craft. It was not easy to be a rehearsal. Something had to be happen. The cellar master asked for support from the Andex monastery, whose brothers were known for their digestible beer. The Probst was not particularly taken with the idea of having a Benedictine to help him, but it didn't help. He was forced to put his seal on the request for help, but he himself had no more of the wise measure of his cellar master. The Salzburg Prince Archbishop, Paris Count Lodron, and the Dukes Maximilian I of Bavaria felt that Probst Stemler had been too colorful. He was suspended. The monastery judge had his 2 love affairs struck iron in the old market. Probst Urban Stemler died after 35 years in office in Baumburg. The efforts of the Andex brother Meinrad to teach the Augustinian canons to brew beers were, however, not necessarily successful. They simply did not want a lesser Benedictine to tell them how to Bier braut. Anyone can come there. After 5 years, he returned to his Andex cell in exasperation. The beer gets better, but the financial situation for the Augustinian monastery is becoming all more dire. Brother Meinrad had painted the sails 2 years ago. As soon as he was gone, the Augustinians suddenly no longer minded following the Benedictine guidelines. Malting and boiling at a constant temperature don't overheat, and the oven and kettle. The brewers and breweries finally took to heart what Meinrad had preached to them for 5 years. Result: the Baumburgers finally had their wholesome beer, provided the weather was fine and the barley and hop harvest was usable quality. The beer was, of course, not to blame for the financial imbalance. In 1632, a fire raged in the old market. Almost all farmers' and craftsmen's houses in the valley fell victim to the fire. Hardly had the buildings been restored to a makeshift condition. In 1633, the Altenmarkets had to grant and feed around 700 horsemen from the imperial cavalry quarters. First, hardly any income, then expenditure. The 30-year War and the plague did the rest. Things went better in Baumburg. The Augustinian canons also kept up with the times. The Gothic buildings were no longer good enough. Baroque was the latest craze. The monastery buildings were rebuilt and expanded representatively. The monastery was bigger and bigger. Many craftsmen and farmers were employed. Hard work, great thirst. The Baumburgers expanded their settlements. The malting furnace was built new and larger, a master brewer and 6 breweries provided for suppliers, and in the monastery tavern the brown beer poured out of the oak barrels. At the foot of the monastery church the provost had a little house built in which the Fusselbinder made and cleaned his barrels. Debts for the glory of God. The lively construction activity tore huge holes in the monastery register. Provost Michael Doeger, who lived 1688 to 1706, left debts of 15,000 guilders. The guilder then had a purchasing power that would be around 50 euros today, 250,000 crowns. His successor, Patritius II Stutner, who lived 1707 to 1737, and Maximilian Sindel, 1737 to 1748, not the years they lived, but the years that they had this position, did not get the situation under control. After Sindel's death, the Augustinian choir foundation stood at 35,000 guilders in Schalk, the equivalent of around 1.75 million euros. This did not prevent Sindel's successor, Probst Joachim Wischow, 1748 to 1761, from having medieval church of St. Margareten replaced by light Rococo church building with the characteristic onion domes. The renovation under the Trostberg master builder Franz Alois Meyer and the Prague court painter Felix Anton Scheffler was completed the 600th anniversary in 1756. Provost Wischow had the sovereign elector Max III Joseph invited to celebration. Meyer and Scheffler almost made it too. The church was finished in 1758 and it became correspondingly more expensive. Bischof's legacy to his successor, Provost Guarinus Steininger, 1761 to 1778, a mountain of debt of 120,000 guilders, today around 6 million euros, a sum whose repayment was no longer manageable for the Augustinian canons. The government in Burghausen and the secret council in Munich intervened, but they did not do this in unison. What the Burghauser proposed, for example, to sell the farmers their farms and inheritance rights instead of spending them on the basis of personal rights, was rejected by the people of Munich in 1780 as the interim administration of the monastery owner Anton Leichner was put in front of the canons in 1780. This was confirmed for the first time that the checkout was in perfect condition. In 1790, Franz I Krumb, a foreign provost who was experienced in economic affairs, was appointed. However, it was not suitable for the self-confident convent. Nevertheless, Krumb managed to reduce the debts by 20,000 guilders within 5 years. Between 1797 and 1801, however, the consequences of the Revolutionary Wars were down to frugal rehearsal. The military hospital in Baumburg Abbey had to take care of numerous injured Bavarian, Imperial and French soldiers. Krumb, whose health was damaged, could no longer cope with this burden and asked for his resignation. The members of the convention chose Propst Franz II Lindemann as his successor, but he should not longer be allowed to further improve the financial situation of the convention. The canons are expropriated. Napoleon Bonaparte had promised his Munich allies a monastic replacement for his cession of goods from the left bank of Rhine. In Munich, Minister Maximilian von Montgelas influenced his elector and later King of Bavaria, Max I Joseph, to close almost all monasteries. Secularization started in 1802. A government emissary, Hofrat Meyer from Munich, visited Baumburg. He gathered all members of the monastery to announce that the transition from ecclesiastical to electoral reign. All inventory and assets were logged and listed. Many people left Baumburg because they no longer expected wages. Repeal Commissioner Endorfer had meanwhile started the handling of the monastery goods. The sale began. 700 years of monastery culture came under the hammer. The Fassbinder was not spared. The dissolution of the monastery and some of his most important equipment was auctioned off. The brewery came to a complete standstill. Only the beer stored in the basement could be used. The sale of the lands in 1803 could only be accomplished after the areas were offered in smaller lots. The brewery should also be sold. However, local purchasing power was too low for such projects. There were oversupply across the country. The location high above the valley with difficult water supply and simple basement deterred potential buyers. Sales also stagnated and the brew threatened to acidify. The brewing activity is stopped. The electoral court chamber assessor Franz Josef von Röckel offered himself as the savior. After purchase of the entire complex without a church failed due to its special conditions, he took part in the auction, this time without a monastery building, and outbid a local bidder. Instead of the required 20,038, he could only pay 3,501 guilders. Von Röckel was only able to pay in February 1804, after he had been threatened that his property would be withdrawn and he had therefore taken out a loan. However, he was proved unable to manage the brewery. All other sources of income also dried up due to his mismanagement. The brewery was silent, the fields remained undeveloped, and the servants, who received no wages, made use of the little that was still there. Von Röckel did not help even the numerous lawsuits against the tax authorities, 84 in number. In 1814, the Baumburg realities passed into new, this time local hands. Fuhrmann Kramer Egid Daxenberger bought the agriculture. The brewery was taken over by a specialist, the innkeeper Michael Windel, both from Altenmarkt. After Wiedel's death, his widow married the mayor's son, a merchant Ludwig Nigel from Bad Tölz. His sons Ludwig and Anton inherited the Baumburg economy, brewery and inn with post office in Altenmarkt. Agricultural was awarded to Anton. Ludwig got a brewery and tavern. The brothers, however, balanced their interest through exchange. Ludwig became the owner of Meyerhof, while Anton was awarded the Altenmarkt postal service. Brewery and agriculture was once again in one hand. And more information, there is much left. The Dietl era. A young mill owner from Abensberg had got to know and love Maria, Ludwig's only daughter, on his study trip. Johann and Maria married in 1873. The Dittel dynasty emerged from this connection and continues to this day. Agriculture and brewery were carefully modernized, and the Baumburger beer, pale and dark, gained a wide circle of friends. A beer cellar driven into the Auberg in the valley and still equipped with a summer bar by Ludwig Nigel in 1840 contributed significantly to the improved beer quality after a long storage period. After Johann Dittel, his son Hans took over the inheritance in 1913. In 1933, the third generation succeeded Dr. Ludwig Dittel in charge. After his almost 40-year reign, the current owner Ludwig Dittel followed in 1972. He gave up livestock farming, and grain was still grown in fields for the time being. Master brewer Josef Semler was employed to preserve the extensive forest stock. The fields leased in brewery in between were used by builder himself, combining tradition and modernity. In the brewery, the wooden fermentation tanks and storage barrels were replaced by aluminium containers. Ludwig Dittel took a big step in 1982 with the renovation of the brewing plant in the western section of the building, which is still focused on company tours today. With the master brewer Peter Schöne, Ludwig Dittel had hired a master of this field. Contrary to previous opinion that brown beer and wheat beer could not be produced in common brewery, Schöne convinced his boss by creating an excellent yeast wheat beer. Today's company has developed from the long monastic tradition, and owners and employers still feel committed to old brewing tradition. Of course, this means the Baumburgers brew their beers according to the Bavarian Purital Law of 1516 and only use the best raw materials, if possible from Chiemgau or at least from Bavaria. All the beer specialties are brewed on site in Baumburg and in best craft tradition. The Klosterbrauerei Baumburg is today always a regionally oriented brewery that knows how to optimally combine established tradition with the requirements and possibilities of the present. Hops, water and malt, as well as clear, pure water from the region, are still the most important basic ingredients for the Baumburger beers. The water is comparatively soft. It has a total hardness of only 11 degrees and is almost free of nitrates. Because of its low value, Baumburger table water is suitable for the production of baby food. The barley for Baumburger barley malt is traditionally grown in Baumburger fields. Because of the Baumburgers no longer operate their own agriculture, former Paltzinger from Salit was won over to continue growing the malting barley from the Baumburg fields. A centuries-old tradition was continued. And some other information about this brewery, not a history, but some other information that could be interesting. Hops and malts, may the Lord preserve it. Baumburg has always and exclusively brewed according to the purity law, a matter of honor. Last but not least, with our new products, our Bock Beer series, we prove that purity requirement does not restrict creative brewers, but rather represents a quality framework for excellent beers. The barley malt from Baumburger beer does not come from Australia, China or the USA. Our barley is grown in the fields around Baumburg. Because we treat our farmers fairly and we pay them fair price, we have managed to keep malting barley in the region even in difficult times. After harvesting the malting barley, usually in first weeks of August, the farmer stores a barley until dormancy has been overcome. Then she comes to the malt house. We are convinced that this type of raw material production not only supports regional economic cycles, but also we obtain the best, namely domestic raw materials for our beers from the region to the region. And about this specific one, the export, it's possible to read the following. A classic Bavarian export brewed with 100% Baumburger barley malt, a real beer from Chiemgau, the cold fermentation process and the long storage time at 0 degrees Celsius in our cellars create a fine and tasty beer. Unlike industrial brewers, we give our beer time only after a storage period of at least 6 to 8 weeks, and after tasting by our master brewer, this beer is filtered and then bottled. The shiny golden yellow beer is a real feast for the eyes, with particularly stable fine foam, pleasant caramel notes, and the malty freshness harmoniously rounded off by light citrus flavors, a slim body with not too bitter bitterness, original wort strength is 12.5 and alcohol content is 5.2. European Beer Star 2013, Baumburger Exporthell was awarded the European Beer Star in bronze in the European Style Export category in 2013, after we have been successful with our special beers Weißerbock and Schoherrenbock in the last few years. I am of course particularly pleased that we have been awarded in a standard category, which experience has shown that an extremely large number of competitors take part, said Klosterbrauerei managing director Dominic Tapper after the award ceremony. And some other information which could be interesting about this brewery. At the top in Chiemgau, that is our slogan. That is geographical indication on or an expression of exaggerated self-confidence, or both, or something in between. We are happy to leave that up to you to judge. The fact is, with our excellent products, our way of living, thinking and working, we take special position in the brewery scene from Baumburg Monastery Brewery. Let's say cheeky now, let's actually explain it with our geographic location. We are sitting up here on our holy mountain, high above the Altstal and looking down on the hustle and bustle in the valley, but at the same time we are granted a broad view with an unobstructed mountain panorama. That means we don't just look down, we also see there are far higher points than our holy mountain, and we are somewhere in the middle. We are very relaxed about that, and this explains our things of the view. Live and let live. Of course we want to be fine, but that does not prevent us from granting everyone else that are doing well. That is what the Baumburg Monastery Brewery mean, Liberalitas Bavarii. We are good and we are, and that is at the top of Chiemgau. Cheers. Home brewer, the Samamia, and then 10 other brewers from Chiemgau and Berchtesgadener Land. Since we are the top of Chiemgau, we of course there, because we love our craft and stand behind our products. The whole thing was initiated by Chiemgau Tourismus EV with Berchtesgadener Land Tourismus in the anniversary year 500 years of purity law. For that we are also the Golden Beer ID Award. Our contribution to the local brewer association, we offer brewery tours and tastings. In addition, a brewery card was issued on which bike tours from one brewery to the next are entered. Further information is available at Heimatbrauer.de. Small brewers, big beers. Under this motto, Bavarian and Austrian brewers from the Inn Salzach region have been meeting since 2008 to present at the variety of beers from regional breweries. Of course, we are there too from the beginning. At the Small Brewer Big Beers event, which take place every Saturday on International Beer Day, April 23, visitors can sample more than 100 specialty beers from around 20 breweries. Ours too, logically. The venue changes annually across the border. How it works: the guest buys a festival glass for €2 and can have the glass filled at each day stand for only €1.50, sometimes a little more depending on the type of beer. The breweries take care of the beer, of course, and the food and the music. There is also a raffle and admission is free. Check it out. Further information is available at kleinbrauergrossebiere.com. Now over to the tasting part, finally my favorite part of the review. Of course, the reward after the speaking is to taste these fantastic beers. Show you the logo here, which is placed on the cap, front label, no back label, so I don't have to speak about that. Front label looking really nice in my opinion. See the church, the monastery. Baumburger.de is a link to the brewer's website, which I will link to in the description box below, of course. In Chiemgau, ganz oben, European Beer Star, the Beer Tasting Bronze Award, European Beer Star here. And Klosterbrauerei Baumburg 1612, hergestellt mit Strom aus 100% Baumburger Wasserkraft. Export hell, Klosterbrauerei Baumburg in Baumburg, of course, das typisch bayerische Export. Zutaten wasserigsten Malzhopfen. Yeah, I think that's it. And here's the Bavarian flag also. Well, let's look at the label. Looks really nice, this one. Giving a really nice impression also. Of course, finally over to the tasting part of the Klosterbrauerei Baumburg export hill. Let's open this one up and pour it up. It's gonna be really interesting to try this. I love Klosterbrauereis, monastery breweries, and export is such a fantastic beer style. Look how beautiful this one is looking. Great pouring, if I could say it myself this time. Perfect 2-finger white crown, beautiful with all the small bubbles raised up, which I hope you can see. Looks really beautiful, and very nice, pale, easy to see through yellow color with very many bubbles, and of course the white crown that is so important to build up and maintain all the way through, keeps the right taste in the glass, and also shows high quality of the ingredients. Let's put this one right here and get the aroma, which is typical export. Not as mild as a Hellas, not as strong hops taste as a Pils. Just a great export, so let's taste it. The Klosterbrauerei Baumburg Export Hell. Prost! Yeah, this is nice. Really fresh and nice. This is a great export, and obvious that the raw materials are great, but it's a brewery with tradition. I really enjoy this one, and look, still quite big, compact white crown, which is so important to have. Keeps the right taste in the glass. This is a real great one. A big recommendation. Fresh, nice, typical Bavarian export style. This is a great export to this one. Really fresh. Great balance between the ingredients of this one. So, big recommendation, this one. Yeah, this one is really nice, and a big recommendation if you can find it. The export hell from Klosterbrauerei Baumburg in Chiemgau in Oberbayern, absolutely most southeast of Bavaria. I think that's it for now. Hope you like, comment, subscribe, and see you again in the next German beer review.